That's kind of cool.
I like that.
All right, so Bill, I don't have a speaking fee, but can I get one of those in the future? They're kind of cool. I'm only kidding. So that is, this is our setting, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, in some of the work that I do on TSN, I do a lot of golf events at the PGA, and they do sit-down sessions like this. It's a very intimate way of doing an interview. So they asked me, Bill asked me if I would do this to talk to Scott LeBlanc, first of all. Big round of applause for Scott. We're not going to talk golf. We're not going to talk golf. But I do know this, that although you're among many friends, being up here to do this may not necessarily be in your definition of comfort zone. So I think it's great of you to do this. And we're going to talk about Scott's life, talk about Scott's work here at the church, talk about his friends, talk about his faith, and talk about his life going forward. A lot of the people in the room, Scott, know your story, but let me start you off with a soft one. Give us your 40 to 60 hour week. What do you do, and what are some of the challenges you face?
Yeah. Well, I'm married with 3 kids. Aiden, front row, who's 10. Isaac is my next, who's 8, and my daughter Annalise is 5. And that's about 40 to 60 hours a week with those 3 right there, really. But in addition to that, I also work, which is nice. So Aiden can have some hats and that type of stuff. But I work as a regional risk manager with a group of car rental companies. I try to be as active as I can in this parish and take part in as many things as possible. I'm on the board of directors for Big Brothers Big Sisters in Halifax, so that of course takes a little bit of time as well.
Your work, does it take you through travel? Do you have to travel through the region? Are you mostly in the HRM? What are the geographic parameters of what you do?
Yeah, the territory that we cover is Atlantic Canada. I do a bit of travel sometimes at the last minute. This week, for example, on Thursday, I realized on Thursday I had to go to Fredericton and back same day, so sometimes that's a bit of a surprise. Wouldn't say I travel a lot, but in the run of a month I may be gone away a couple days.
Was this your career goal? Was this something you set? Take us back to when you were 18 versus now at the age of 41, correct?
Yes.
How has it evolved? Is this how you saw your life being professionally? We'll get to the personal in a moment, but is this where you figured you would arrive, or was it a winding road to get here?
It was one of those things. I don't know that I look back and there was moments where I thought, maybe I'll be a hockey player for Montreal.
It pays well.
It pays well when you're good.
And we hope God is a Montreal Canadiens fan too. I've said this before. But I think he cheers for Pittsburgh, just so you know.
So no, I don't know from a career standpoint that I ever really mapped it out. I mean, I went to university, took business. To be honest, I switched. I started off in science. I thought I'd be a psychologist, and that didn't go as planned. So I switched to business, and I never really knew where I'd land. I just came out of university and wanted to work, and things just kind of followed from there.
Did you find? I found when I was growing up and I came out of university, in high school there's the pressure of getting into university and decide your focus, and then when you get out of university, you're supposed to be married with 2 kids and a mortgage. There's a lot of pressure in society to fit this definition of the 20/21st century man or woman. And I struggled with my identity when it came to being the round peg in the round hole. Everything was okay in time, but sometimes my time and pace was different than other people. Did you find the mid-20s pressure to arrive at a professional place where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of people in university are challenged with, the university lifestyle, and I didn't get caught up in that a lot, but I found once I got out and started working, it was a challenge, because, if you've ever done those strength finders, one of my strengths, I guess you could say in some ways, is competitive. So regardless of what I'm doing, I'm looking to see what's that person doing. I can do more than that. I can get there quicker than that. So yeah, it becomes a bit of a, not really having that career goal, that thing I said, well, that's what I want to get to. You're just going as fast as you can. You're not really sure where you're going.
Do you find yourself stopping to pause and appreciate what's around you more the older you get, taking more stock as you move along in your life?
Yeah, I find I have less time to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there is, it's interesting, and I'm sure most people could probably identify with this. At 20, you look back and think, boy, when I was 15, I didn't have a clue. At 30, I said, boy, when I was 20, I didn't have a clue. Now I'm saying, boy, when I was 30, I didn't have a clue. And I suspect I'm going to say that every year that goes, boy, I thought I was pretty smart. I think I knew what was going on, but you just didn't really get it.
Just to give you perspective, I look in the mirror and say, I'm 43 and I don't have a clue. So you're not, you're not alone, man. You're doing better than I am.
So 2 years, I'm going to say the same thing.
It's a long 2 years, though. Lots of time, lots of time. Tell us about the church. We'll get to the church. I have a sense of what the church means to you and the role that this plays in your life now. Give us the run-up. Did you come from a household that faith and church was a strong backdrop, or did you find it on your own? How did you come to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, that sort of phrase of being a cradle Catholic. That's really what I was. I grew up in that. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. I have an older brother and an older sister. We grew up in Sackville, and from the time I can remember, we went to Mass every Sunday. I went to Sunday school every weekend. And my dad's here, so maybe he'd contradict me, although he doesn't have a microphone, so I guess I have that advantage. I don't remember complaining about going to church. I don't remember, that struggle. My son Aiden, if he would listen to this, I don't remember fighting going to church all the time. Sunday school sometimes, I talked a lot, and I remember getting kicked out of Sunday school a whole bunch of times because I wouldn't be quiet. But yeah, I mean, that was really always a part of our family, so I saw my older sister start to become serious about her faith, and just to kind of take a step back, and I don't know what time this happened, but I really saw, my parents continue to grow in their faith. I mean, we always went to church, but I saw it progress beyond that. I saw it where it wasn't just a Sunday commitment, it was something that started to take over more than just that. So I saw my parents as a couple spending time with other couples of faith. And wanting to explore their faith and share their faith. I saw my dad who would get together with other men before work at the church and spend time reading the gospel, sharing their faith. I saw my dad every morning get up and pray before going to work. And for me at that age, that's kind of what becomes normal. I saw my sister, who was 3 years older than me, start to go down that path. So for me, it became very, very normal. That was just what I knew. So I was glad to follow through that. And that's, where for me that kind of started was it became normal. It's what I saw. It's what made sense to me. And my friends were in that place as well.
By the way, never apologize for being thrown out of the Sunday school class. It happens to all of us. When my mother and father, you triggered a memory. My mother and father tell the story a lot. When I was 8 years old, I was in Sunday school class, and I put my hand up and asked the question. I said, so when Cain killed Abel, Cain was kicked out and he was sent away. And when he went to this new place, he knew his wife. And I was like, where did she come from? And the teacher could not give me a satisfactory answer. I kept pressing it, so he said, get out. So I learned sometimes it's not nice to ask hard questions, even if they're precocious questions and well-meaning and well-founded. So we all have stories about being thrown out of Sunday school class. Ron mentioned a moment ago, and I forget how he framed it exactly, but as I interpreted it, he basically said you come up in faith and then you go your own way when you're 16, 17 years old. I'll use the word dip. I don't like the word dip, but did it dip? Did it meander? Did you stray from the church, stray from your faith, focus on extracurricular activities or life activities that didn't necessarily include the church? Was there a pause button, I guess, for you?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly did happen. And even before that, growing up in that faith, at that point in time, I was just following what was happening. Seeing what my dad and my mom did and what my sister did and my friends around. And in one sense, you're going with the flow. I knew who Jesus was. I wouldn't say that I knew Jesus. But because I put myself in those places, I remember being in grade 8, and it was really the first time that I kind of made that decision on my own. And I had gone to a retreat that was put on by a group of young people that's what they did. They traveled around for a year and put on retreats for young kids. And I'd been to a few of these before, and we actually had a number of these folks stay at our house when they're traveling up in this area. And to be honest, looking at the young people and seeing the impact that having that relationship was very good for me. I mean, it was something that, you see your parents, and that's one thing. My sister certainly added to that, but to see other young people that were living, they were joyful, they were accepting of people, they were loving. And at this retreat, there was a moment in time where one of the team members would come and pray with you. And I remember that very specifically. It was at St. Agnes Parish, and we were in the chapel, and this guy, and I knew him a little bit already, had come and prayed with me. And I don't know for sure exactly what the prayer was. I suspect it was something around, hey, I'm ready to make that decision to have Jesus be part of my life, that I want to have that relationship. And I remember having that prayer, and I can put myself right there again, and the sense of peace that I felt, that sort of knowledge of, yeah, I knew Jesus, I knew the stories in the Bible, I knew about him, but at this point in time, I knew Jesus. I knew that he was a friend, I knew that he was real for me. And that was a transformative time for me, and fairly young age, in grade 8, to kind of have that experience. So, and again, I was in that place where I had that support from my family, from my friends, and you asked me, did I have that dip, did I have that challenge? And I think at that age, life is completely up and down. So there would be times where I'm not being the person I should be, and I would go back to another retreat and get brought back up and down, and I saw myself starting to take some steps towards a deeper relationship, getting involved in youth ministry myself, and doing a few of those types of things. So. And that was great, but still certainly some challenges from time to time.
I know that there are a couple points you wanted to touch on before we wrapped up, but I wanted to bring it to today. I'll pretend I'm a news reporter when I ask this question. Being active in the church to you means what?
Well, I think a challenge that I've had from time to time is that, growing up in that faith, it becomes, you're walking, and it's a little bit like you asked me about my career, and did I see where I was going? And no, I didn't, and in one sense, my faith life became that to a certain extent from time to time, where, well, I'm going to church because that's what I do, I go to church. I'm involved in my faith, I take part Friday mornings, there's a group of men that get together here, and I come to that. But oftentimes, I'm not sure that I'm necessarily making that hard decision each and every time. I'm just following a habit. But I think that's really a starting point, is still that there's a decision that I'm going to make this a part of my life, but then, trying to go even deeper to say, well, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this?
It sounds like you're saying it doesn't necessarily have to give something back to you. You're happy to be all in giving, and anything you get back is bonus or fulfillment, but it's not a conditional relationship in your mind.
That sounds ideal.
Is that the reality?
Well, it's funny. I go back as a kid, and I had a good childhood. But I was always one of the smallest kids in the class. I wore glasses, and glasses, back there wasn't cool glasses back then. There was just, you had glasses. Another challenge I had was that I stuttered a lot, and if there's a trifecta of good, that's kind of a trifecta of bad: glasses, stuttering, and small. I had friends and stuff, but as kids can be, you kind of get ridiculed a little bit, and I think what that meant for me, anytime and anything I did, was driving me to looking for acceptance, to looking for recognition, to being welcomed. And when I take a look at, going through school and the peer pressure you deal with, of course, that's what drives you. You want to be accepted. As a kid, you think, boy, when I get older, I don't have to deal with that anymore. Not so much, obviously. So I get into work, and that's what drives me there. Do I want people to respect me? I want people to accept me, which in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that. But you go back to what your faith is, and what your faith tells you, how you should be acting, the things you should be saying, the way you should be treating people. There's a challenge, because there's that sort of inside that's telling you, don't rock the boat. You don't want to be on the outside like you used to be. You want to be on the inside. But it's interesting. I find that as well as I get involved in things at the parish. Even this, for example. I'm excited to do it, but I'm checking my mind to say, am I trying to do this and sitting there thinking, boy, how many people can I get to come up and say, great job? Will that really change me? And that's the challenge of getting involved and knowing that, what I'm trying to do is to respond to God's call, to do His will. And His will might be something great. His will might be just those simple things on a daily basis, responding to a conversation, how I talk to somebody, how I act, something simple like that. So I get back to what is being involved with the parish. I think it's being open to what's God's will for me at this moment, and trying to listen to that, and not getting caught up with what do I want, what do I think is going to impress people.
One of my favorite words in the world, in the dictionary, is the word fellowship. I love it. It's a happy word. It makes me smile when I say it. Whether you have a deep and abiding faith or not, if you walk in this room, you would have to be asleep not to feel a spirit of fellowship.
Absolutely.
The strength you take from these numbers to you means what?
Well, I go back to what I saw growing up, and for me, knowing that my parents were involved with others with faith, knowing that my dad was committed to spending time with other men in faith, and that had a huge impact on what I saw with his faith. For me, that became what I wanted. I can, for years, I know that that's something I've always looked for, is fellowship with men, because, men share faith in a particular way. I mean, my wife and I share our faith as well, and that's wonderful, that's great, but it's different. And that's what I've always looked for, and that's why when I see this, when I see our group that comes together on Friday mornings, any opportunity for men to step up for me is it's strengthening. It's sort of a confirmation of what I believe, that I think that, that's what I need. But I think even greater than that, I think that's what our church needs. I think that's what society needs. They need to see men that are strong, that are men, but that they have a value that they stick to, and that they have a relationship.
Wanted to wrap it up with a couple of questions. We spoke yesterday, we spoke again this morning, so some of this is choreographed, rehearsed, and then we want to make sure we have our theme straight. You wanted me to ask you about moments or a moment in your life which made you question your faith. Could you bring us back to anything or a point of crisis where you, I'm not saying get down on your knees and said, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" but at the same time said to yourself, what is this? This isn't fair. This has me questioning my faith because of this. Were there moments like this in your life, or one defining moment?
Yeah, I think a big moment for me was, I graduated from university, I started a job, and again, like I said, I'm chasing. I don't know what I'm chasing. I feel like a dog chasing my tail half the time, but I'm chasing something. Being competitive, I'm wanting to get ahead, so I'm putting everything into my career. And I think that was really that first time where, I moved away from my job, I left my support system, my family. I still believed, but I wasn't living out that belief. I was chasing something more than that. I certainly wasn't spiraling out of control, but certainly not living the life that I would have lived, and living the life that I knew I should be living. And work was going great, and I had the opportunity to go to some meetings in the U.S. This was 1997. I was 25 years old, and my first night down in the U.S. Had a seizure. And it was a big one that I don't remember having it. I don't remember the details of it.
This was out of the blue. You had no health track at all that brought you to this moment.
Nothing at all, like no headaches, no warning at all. And being as bright and as conscious as you can be at 25, I decided rather than going to a doctor or the hospital down there, I'd just go to 2 days of meetings. So that was quite smart. But smart enough to know when I get back, maybe I'll go see a doctor. So I did go see a doctor, and they sent me in for a scan, and the information came back that I had a brain tumor. And, that's not something you're thinking of at 20. I mean, at 25, I'm a superhero. Nothing can touch me. But it's interesting, because I look back at that, and even shortly afterwards, but even more so now, I look back at that, and I asked my wife this last night when I was going over some of these things with her. I don't remember being scared. And I asked her, I said, did I seem scared? She's like, no. And I know that, my fear was, what's going to happen to this life that I'm trying to build? What's going to happen to my career? I couldn't drive for a year, and the job I had to drive. So I couldn't drive for a year. I had to move back home with my parents, which, at the age of 25, a little humble. But it was interesting because, getting back into that situation, I was getting back into where my support came from, where that strength, where that community came from. you know, I got back into the parish that I was, that I'd grown up in, and it was interesting knowing that the community was praying for me. And in fact, at one point in time, I don't know if it was the last Sunday before I was going in for surgery, but they physically grabbed me, pulled me aside, and people started praying over me for healing. And at 25, not overly comfortable with that. I mean, I'd seen it, and I don't mind praying for other people, but not me. So I went in for surgery, and the surgery went unbelievable. They were able to take the tumor out. It was contained. It wasn't cancerous. I didn't have to have radiation. I didn't have to have any chemotherapy. You know, I've been for scans afterwards. There's never been anything since, which at the time, you take that for granted. You know, like I said, at the time, I'm struggling to understand, why is this happening to me? I don't know that I ever got to the point and said, God, why me? But, you know, you're struggling a little bit with it, you know, because you get knocked down a peg, or 2 or 3, or however many pegs, you know. But I know that I've looked back at that time frame since, and even very recently coming to this realization that, you know, that prayer for healing, that worked. You know, the tumor wasn't gone, but the miracle of all the things that stack up, that it's not cancerous, you know, there's no radiation, there's no chemo, I've never had one problem since. I was out of work for 3 weeks before I went back to work after the surgery. Get some good comments going back, you know, scar head and stuff like that, so co-workers are always fun that way. But I can look back, and I know that there was healing there. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that God used that as an opportunity to bring me back to where I needed to be. You know, I connected again with my current wife, Tammy. At that time, we started dating, and you know, she's very strong in her faith, and I look and I know that I wouldn't be where I was today without being with her in that environment. That faith was important. So it's just amazing that something like that, for me, can bring me back to where I needed to be.
It's a remarkable story. To finish, your message to the men here this morning would be what? If I put you on the spot to leave them, not from a Don Rickle standpoint, leave them laughing, but if you want to leave them, if you want to say something timely and timeless to wrap up the morning, you would say what?
Well, I guess the one thing that comes to mind as I thought about this was there was a story that I read, and it was about an American priest. His name was Father Walter Sizek, if that's the right pronunciation, and he became a priest shortly before the Second World War. And at the time, you know, obviously there was a lot going on in Europe, and the Pope was calling for priests to go and minister to the Christians in Russia that were being persecuted. And in his mind, that's where I need to be. And he was following God's plan. You know, so he got over there and did end up finding his way into Russia, which at the time was a little challenging, and was, you know, hey, thought he was living what God wanted. He was ministering to the people. Well, the Russians found out who he was, and they arrested him. And he spent months and months and months in prison, going through solitary and interrogations and all that type of stuff. All that while knowing that he's doing God's will, but still relying on his own strength. Until it came to a point in time where they finally broke him. And at that moment, he signed a phony confession that he was this Vatican spy. And he describes that moment as one of the darkest moments of his life, because he thought he had the strength to withstand all of this. He didn't understand why he was having to go through all of this if he was trying to do God's will, but he figured he could get through it on his own, and he was constantly questioning what God was doing. But what came out of that for him was the realization that all of the moments that we have throughout the day, whether they're good, they're bad, they're mundane, the small things, that's God's will. That yes, he can have this great plan, this great, you know, mission that he's doing, but the details of every day is an opportunity to answer and to do God's will. And for me, that's a challenge. You know, I feel like I follow God, but, you know, as you know, in the story where Jesus calls the disciples, they drop their nets and follow him. I feel like I'm following him, but I'm still dragging my net a bit. And that's my challenge, is trying to give up full control, to surrender completely everything to his will, and not still trying to rely on my own strength. And that's what I guess the challenge, or the thing I would put out is, you whether for me, living my faith for, 30, 40 years, and people have been living it longer, but even those people that are living, their faith that's perhaps a bit newer, that the highs and the lows, whatever it is, to know that Jesus wants more of what we are. He wants more of us. And that to try to recommit to that every day. And that's the challenge for me. I think it's a challenge for a lot of people.
Well, I've come to a couple of conclusions over the last 15 minutes. You're a better public speaker than I am. So, congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott LeBlanc, thank him, please, for joining us. I also know it's not always easy to talk about yourself, so we thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Holy smokes, good speaker. That's not easy. He made that look way too easy. So thanks, Scott. Even if he's a natural speaker like that, that takes still a lot of courage. When we first started talking to Scott about what he was going to share, he said he had a fairly mundane, if that was the word, story to tell. Man, there's nothing mundane about the story. And it just reinforces we've all got our own unique one. And even with solid faith, Scott's whole life still struggles. Still a work in process. And but the great thing about it is, that strong faith. You're going to get there. Outstanding.
Thanks.